Hi, we have today with us Karolina Korth, Chief Digital Officer of Siemens Mobility Spain. Karolina will be talking to us about her career, experiences she had in innovation, her current role at Siemens, and then also the experience she just had in the classroom where she talked about herself, her role, and got some feedback from the class. So with no further ado, hi Karolina and welcome to Esade. Thank you for coming. So Karolina, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your innovation-related experiences?
So I think that I had this pleasure to start working in innovation before it was even called innovation. So when I started my career at Siemens, Health in Years, I was working in the unit that was defining what are the new business models for the future. And back then we were talking about telemedicine, we were talking about also new commercialization models. And it sounded back then like very futuristic. We never called it innovation, and we really also back then, we didn't know that we were onto something so big that right now, for example, this is a very massive organization that is targeting within Siemens, that is targeting digitalization in healthcare. And so I started working on innovation very early. And later I've been working in Roche David Esade. So at Roche David Esade I was responsible for open innovation, which is like another part of innovation, not only like using the internal resources, but also basically reaching out to startups, finding partners that can bring the innovation to your organization. And right now, as a Chief Digital Officer, like innovation is like basically my daily work. We are doing it like internally with a very strong R&D team, but we are also like building an ecosystem of startup that are supposed to bring us also innovation and ideas and inspiration to be used internally.
So building on that, can you tell us what Chief Digital Officer does?
Yeah, I think that in the meantime, almost every single organization has Chief Digital Officer. This is also a kind of new role at Siemens Mobility Spain. I started working at the end of last year, and basically my responsibility is like to build digital portfolio. We have a very strong hardware portfolio, but like how to also satisfy customer needs and answer customer needs with digitalization. Digitalization also internally, and this is also one of my focus points, is not only to answer customer needs, but like also like how to digitize internally to work better, to be quicker on the market, to be more agile. So these all have like these two elements.
So can you tell us, can you give us an example of external and internal?
Oh yeah. So with the external digitalization, we are currently in the process of building our digital roadmap. We have a very clear definition of customer problems, and some of these problems can be solved with digitalization. So for example, if you think the cost of the infrastructure for like big railway company is really a problem. So by putting some of the assets into the cloud, you can limit some of the problems, you can minimize them. So that will be like one of the big movements that we have, and a lot of portfolio elements. We will be digitizing, building a true digital twin. If you think about internal digitalization, it is very much related with what kind of processes, what kind of tools we are using. So for example, for the internal digitalization, there are like a lot of challenges, for example, that we develop in the purchasing department, that for example, we see what kind of delays do we have them and how can they be solved with definition of proper tools. But like also if you think like we are in a project business, like the projects are getting more and more complex and they require the real-time data flow. So what kind of tools are we going to develop and use in the future that will allow us that everybody that is involved in a project development is always having like the newest information.
All right, very interesting. Can you give us one of your challenges and one of the early successes in this role?
Yes, I think that like one of the successes that I'm like very proud of is that after a very short time we already have a first collaboration with a startup in place. The startup is called Theros. It's working on a Hyperloop technology, and we are supporting them with engineering hours and our support and know-how to make sure that their product will be successful later in the market. What are the challenges? Digitalization is all about mindset, and we see that it's all about cultural change, like how to also make sure that everybody feels part of digitalization, that we establish also a culture that we feel confident and we feel confident enough to innovate, to fail, to share failures with each other. And I think just like this is the cultural change process that I believe this is right now one of the most challenging.
How do you change that, right? So that kind of attitude towards failure, so important to be, I mean, acceptance or tolerance of failure as a part of the learning process is central to the innovation process. But at the same time, this is probably one of the most difficult parts, particularly in the regulated industry like yours.
Yeah.
How do you plan to tackle that?
Right. So we have a culture initiative. So we have a few selected employees, talents that are working on defining different measures. One of the measures that they came up with was to establish a trust moment, that like all big meetings will be starting with sharing a story where you failed and learn based on that. Basically, like to normalize mistakes, like in such a demanding and like such a perfectionist environment that we are like that we are operating. It's so important, like to normalize mistakes and to indicate that if you're trying a lot of things, some of them will fail. And we believe that this is like this element and like this our failure tolerance is absolutely important, like to be innovative. Otherwise, we will never be bold. We will never go for Horizon 3 and disruptive innovation.
So is this are we talking about failure in safety regulations on trains, or what kind of failures are we talking about?
Right, I think just like safety first. So I'm very glad that you're saying that, because we are starting every single meeting with a safety moment where we are like sharing information about how important is safety. We have absolute zero harm policy within the company. So there are like few non-negotiables, I would say. But for example, like trying the collaboration, like building a new model that you will just like later find out is not working in a safe environment. Collaborating in a different way, or like trying like even new internal tool and like finding out later that perhaps there are like better already existing on the market. It should be absolutely normal. Or perhaps sometimes like bringing something to the market, like defining like proof of concept, and later defining that perhaps there is already something better existing, or the customer is not really ready to pay. I think all of that shall be absolutely normal for us, and it's like part of like innovation pipeline that some of the ideas we will kill.
So failing safely and productively.
Yes.
Wonderful. Last question for you, Karolina. You've been in the MBA class. You shared your experiences with us. Students loved it. They learned a lot. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
What are your takeaways?
Oh my goodness. So I really much enjoyed it. I so enjoyed a lot of questions when they ask about something that I wish this question came when I was really working on that. So they would be like really good sparring partners, because very often like they came with questions that like we came perhaps a little bit too late on, like for example, like do we want to include other stakeholders? Do we want to include customers? When we will inform whom in the process? What I really liked that at the end of the session we used Mentimeter also like to get their feedback.
In what sense? Can you describe for our
so this is the tool
audience
that we do use a lot internally that allows you to give real-time feedback. about presentation, or like to submit real-time answer. So if you just can imagine, like right now, like in every single session, there were like over 40 students that they gave me their ideas of how to build, for example, an ecosystem. And they are bringing an expertise that is like very unique, and I cannot enter that very easily, because they've seen other corporates trying to build an ecosystem. They've seen other corporates that are trying successfully or less successfully to collaborate with them, to engage them with different activities. So I found it like very helpful when they were saying like, okay, like why don't you do something like the company X? But what didn't work for them was that, and like why don't you like build up on that? So that was extremely helpful. And so I'm looking forward to go into details, like to analyze all of these ideas and start already implementing.
Wonderful. Well, I'm really glad that that we were able to help and kind of give back for your participation in the class. And then, I look forward to continuing this conversation and collaboration and experimenting as we did, and finding new ways to make this a fruitful relationship.
Okay.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Karolina.
you so much. Thank you for having me.